In the early hours of August 8, 2021, police discovered the body of a young woman hidden in thick undergrowth near a popular family park in Leicestershire, England. She had been strangled and her throat had been cut 14 times. Just hours after killing her, the man responsible went online and searched for information about 3 of Britain's most notorious serial killers, men who had murdered women and children. What investigators uncovered next would reveal something far more calculated than anyone expected. Megan Newborough was 23 years old in the summer of 2021. She worked in human resources at Ibstock Brick, one of the largest brick manufacturing companies in the United Kingdom, based in Leicestershire. She was well liked by colleagues. Outside of work, she taught dance to children, something she'd been passionate about since childhood. In early August, she had just purchased her first home and was days away from her 24th birthday. Everything was falling into place. In late June of that year, Megan met Ross McCullum through work. He was 30 years old, 5 years her senior, and worked as a lab assistant in the company's laboratory. They met when Megan, as part of her HR duties, conducted a data protection audit of his department. What started as a professional interaction quickly became something more. Phone numbers were exchanged. Text messages began flowing. And they didn't just trickle. Over the span of 5 to 6 weeks, the two exchanged more than 3,500 messages. That's over 100 messages per day. Many were sexually explicit. The relationship had become intense very quickly. McCullum lived with his parents in the nearby town of Colville. To some at work, he seemed like someone carrying emotional weight. Months earlier, he had confided in his supervisor about alleged childhood sexual abuse, creating an image of someone vulnerable and wounded. Megan, described by her family as someone who saw the best in people, appears to have believed she could help him. But there were warning signs that Megan never knew about. At work, McCullum did something disturbing. He showed nude photographs of Megan to male colleagues. Private, intimate images. He displayed them like trophies, bragging to coworkers about sexual encounters with her. One colleague would later describe the behavior as inappropriate, but no one reported it to human resources. No one told Megan what was happening behind her back. On the evening of August 6, 2021, Megan left her family home in Nuneaton. She told her mother she was meeting McCullum for a walk. Her father called out from the kitchen as she headed for the door, "Be safe, see you soon." She was in a happy mood. She had no reason to be afraid. McCullum's parents were going to be out that evening. The house would be empty. It was just a casual Friday night. Megan climbed into her white Citroën C3 and began the 20-mile drive to Colville. But something was shifting in ways she couldn't see. Within 40 minutes of arriving at that house, Megan Newborough would be dead. Megan arrived at Windsor Close in Colville shortly after 8 o'clock in the evening. It was an ordinary residential street. Quiet houses. Families inside. Nothing unusual. McCullum was waiting. The house was empty as planned. Megan walked through the door, and for the next 15 or 20 minutes, according to McCullum's own later testimony, they talked in the back room. Then they moved to the living room. What happened next would become the subject of intense legal debate. McCullum would later claim that during a sexual encounter, something triggered him. He said that when Megan playfully slapped his leg and pulled him closer, it brought back traumatic memories and he lost control. He described it as exploding like a volcano, a blind rage he couldn't stop. But here's what the evidence showed. Ross McCullum strangled Megan Newborough with his hands. Manual strangulation is not a quick act. It requires sustained pressure for minutes. You have to keep squeezing even as the person struggles and fights for air. The pathologist would later determine that strangulation was the cause of death. And then McCullum did something that investigators would find impossible to reconcile with any claim of lost control. After Megan was dead, or very close to death, he went to the kitchen and retrieved a knife. He returned and cut her throat. Not once. 14 times. 14 separate cuts across her neck. When police later asked him why, he gave a chilling answer. He said he did it to make sure Megan was dead. By approximately 8:45 that evening, less than 40 minutes after Megan had walked through the door, she was dead. But Ross McCullum's night was only beginning. What he did next would become crucial evidence of his state of mind. He loaded Megan's body into the passenger seat of her own car. He collected bloodstained bedding and towels from where she had died. Despite not having a driver's license, he got behind the wheel and drove away. His first stop was Hermitage Road in the nearby village of Whitwick, about 1.5 miles away. There, in the undergrowth alongside the road, he threw Megan's mobile phone into the bushes. But even as he disposed of it, he did something deeply disturbing. He sent text messages to that phone. Messages saying she was amazing. Messages designed to create a false timeline, to make it look like Megan was still alive and everything was normal. He was texting a dead woman's phone while her body sat in the passenger seat beside him. From there, McCullum drove deeper into the countryside toward the village of Woodhouse Eaves, home to Beacon Hill Country Park, a beautiful area where families come for walks and picnics. He turned onto Charlie Road, a narrow, remote country lane. Stone walls line parts of the road with thick undergrowth beyond. It's quiet there, especially at night. He stopped the car, pulled Megan's partially clothed body from the passenger seat, and lifted her over a stone wall. He dumped her in the thick bracken and brambles, leaving her hidden where she might not be found for days. Then he kept driving. His next stop was Loughborough, a larger town a couple of miles away. He drove to the car park at Loughborough College. And this is where McCullum made a critical mistake. The car park had CCTV cameras. Security surveillance. And those cameras captured everything. They recorded McCullum arriving in Megan's white Citroën. They recorded him pulling items from the car. They recorded him changing his clothes right there in the car park, stripping off what he was wearing and putting on fresh garments. And they recorded him walking to nearby bins and disposing of blood-stained bedding, blood-stained towels, and Megan's personal belongings, her boots and her glasses. He abandoned the car and called a taxi back to Colville. When his parents arrived home later that evening, McCullum was sitting there acting as if nothing had happened. He was calm. Normal. He made conversation. At around 11:30 that night, he called Megan's phone, the phone he had thrown into the bushes hours earlier, and left a voicemail. In it, he told her he loved her. His voice was calm and affectionate, as if he were just checking in with his girlfriend after a nice evening. He knew she was dead. He knew exactly where her body was. And yet he performed this act of deception for anyone who might later check the phone records. Then, in the quiet of his room, McCullum went online. He searched for pornography. And then he searched for serial killers. Specifically, he looked up Levi Belfield, who murdered multiple women including 13-year-old Millie Dowler. Ian Huntley, who murdered two 10-year-old schoolgirls, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. And Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, who murdered at least 13 women. All three were killers of women and girls. And Ross McCullum, just hours after strangling and stabbing Megan Newborough, was reading about them. When investigators later asked him why, he said something chilling. He said it was almost like a fantasy world. Saturday morning, August 7th. Megan Newborough had not come home. Her mother, Elaine, tried calling her phone. No answer. She tried again and again. This wasn't like Megan. She was close with her family, always in touch. By afternoon, the worry had turned to panic. The family contacted Leicestershire police and reported her missing. Officers began tracing her movements. They knew she had gone to meet Ross McCullum. They knew about the relationship. McCullum became a person of interest immediately. But they didn't know where Megan was. In the early hours of Sunday morning, August 8th, police searching the countryside near Woodhouse Eaves made a devastating discovery. In thick undergrowth off Charlie Road, hidden in brambles near Beacon Hill Country Park, they found Megan's body. She had been there for over 30 hours. Officers knocked on the Newborough family's door before dawn. When Megan's parents opened it and saw police standing there, they knew. The investigation had become a murder inquiry. Detective Inspector Jenny Heggs took the lead. The first major break came quickly. Police located Megan's white Citroën C3 abandoned at Loughborough College. When forensic teams examined it, they found blood. Megan's blood, on the passenger side and exterior. Inside the car, they found something even more critical, a glove containing DNA from two people. Megan Newborough and Ross McCullum. Then investigators pulled the CCTV footage from the college car park. And there he was. Arriving in Megan's car. Opening the boot. Changing his clothes. Walking to bins and dumping blood-stained items. The footage was clear and methodical. It showed a man in complete control of his actions. This footage would become one of the most powerful pieces of evidence in the case because it directly contradicted what McCullum would later claim. Digital forensics recovered Megan's mobile phone from where McCullum had thrown it in Whitwick. Analysts extracted the messages, more than 3,500 texts between them. They found messages McCullum sent after Megan was already dead. They found the voicemail where he told her he loved her, recorded hours after he had killed her. And they found his search history. The pornography. The serial killers. All searched within hours of the murder. Detective Inspector Heggs would later make a rare and blunt statement. She said she genuinely believed that Ross McCullum had enjoyed killing Megan, that it had excited him, and that he had the potential to kill again. Workplace witnesses came forward. McCullum's supervisor testified that McCullum had confided in him months earlier about alleged childhood sexual abuse. Another colleague testified that McCullum had shown him nude photographs of Megan and bragged about sexual encounters with her. Ross McCullum was arrested and charged with murder. Throughout police interviews, he admitted to killing Megan but insisted it was manslaughter, not murder. He claimed he had lost control due to PTSD from childhood trauma. He claimed it was a moment of blind rage that he couldn't stop. But investigators found 3 critical contradictions that would dismantle his defense. The first contradiction was the strangulation itself. McCullum claimed he lost control in a momentary explosion of rage triggered by trauma. But manual strangulation requires sustained, continuous pressure for several minutes. You can't strangle someone to death in a split second. Forensic experts explained that throughout those minutes, the person is making a choice to keep applying pressure, to keep squeezing, even as the victim struggles. This was not a momentary loss of control. It was a sustained, deliberate act. The second contradiction was the knife. McCullum claimed he didn't know what he was doing, that he was in the grip of uncontrollable trauma. But after Megan was already dead or dying from strangulation, he made a conscious decision to leave the room, go to the kitchen, retrieve a knife, return, and cut her throat 14 times. When asked why, he told police it was to make sure she was dead. Think about what that means. If someone is truly in a dissociative rage, they don't pause to get a weapon and then methodically ensure their victim is dead. That's calculated. That's intent. The third and perhaps most damning contradiction was everything that came after. McCullum claimed he was in a traumatized state, not in control of his actions. But the CCTV footage from Loughborough College showed something completely different. It showed a man who calmly loaded a body into a car, drove to multiple locations to dispose of evidence, changed his clothes in a public car park, threw away blood-stained items, and then took a taxi home. It showed a man who sent fake text messages to create a false timeline. A man who left a fake voicemail hours later to further that deception. A man who then went online to search for serial killers. At what point in this sequence does someone regain control? The prosecution argued the answer was simple, because he never lost it. Investigators also noted the pattern of behavior before the murder. The nude photos shown to colleagues. The bragging about sexual encounters. The violent and misogynistic content in text messages. This wasn't a man who simply snapped. This was a man who objectified women, violated trust, and engaged in predatory behavior. The case moved toward trial. And as evidence mounted, it became clear that the jury would have to answer a fundamental question. Was this a traumatized man who lost control in a moment of triggered rage? Or was this something far more calculated and disturbing? The trial of Ross McCullum began in October 2022 at Leicester Crown Court. It lasted 6 weeks. Every single day, Megan's family sat in that courtroom. Her mother and father. Her sister Claire and brother John. They heard testimony describing Megan's final moments in graphic detail. They sat through the CCTV footage. The text messages. The serial killer searches. It was torture. The prosecution laid out the evidence systematically. The sustained strangulation. The 14 postmortem knife wounds. The elaborate cover-up. The fake messages and voicemail. The calm, calculated behavior captured on camera. The disturbing online searches. McCullum's defense tried to paint him as a victim of his own trauma, a man triggered into an uncontrollable rage. But the contradictions were too stark. The evidence was too clear. On December 12, 2022, the jury returned their verdict. Guilty of murder. McCullum nodded twice as it was read. At the back of the courtroom, Megan's family cried and embraced. 3 days later came sentencing. The family read victim impact statements. Megan's brother John said, "We're the ones now serving a life sentence. No amount of time in prison can bring Megan back." But it was Megan's sister Claire who delivered the line that would echo beyond that courtroom. Looking directly at Ross McCullum, she said, "I hope she haunts you." The judge sentenced McCullum to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years before parole eligibility. But the family felt justice had not been fully served. Under UK law at the time, murders in the home carried a 15-year starting point versus 25 years for murders outside or with a weapon brought to the scene. Because McCullum killed Megan at his house using a knife already there, he effectively received what many saw as a 10-year reduction. The Newborough family launched the Megan Newborough Foundation and joined campaigns to change sentencing laws. They installed a memorial plaque at the murder site with the words, "Murder is murder, change the law." Their advocacy contributed to the UK government announcing in December 2024 that it would review sentencing for domestic murders and implement tougher penalties. Ross McCullum remains in prison. He won't be eligible for parole until 2045. Detective Inspector Hegg's words linger. She believed he had the potential to kill again. On that August evening, when Megan Newborough drove to Colville believing she was meeting someone she cared about, she had no idea what waited. She couldn't know that within 40 minutes her life would end. That her body would be discarded in countryside. That her family would be left with grief that would reshape the rest of their lives. But she also couldn't know that her name would become a rallying cry. That her story would spark a movement for legal reform. That her family would turn unimaginable pain into a force for change. Megan Newborough's life was taken. But as her sister said, in words that will follow Ross McCullum forever, "I hope she haunts you."